Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Buckle up, folks, because this one is coming in hot. My guest this week is Kathy Fettke. She's one of the 4 hosts of Bigger Pockets on the Market. And I've had Dave Meyer, Henry Washington, and now Kathy on the show. James Daynard, I'm coming for you. But Kathy has 2 other podcasts, an entire Real Wealth network. You're going to hear so many tips. You need to get ready. We're going to talk a lot about simplifying real estate investing to find real wealth and how Kathy did it with her husband, Rich, over the years. Let's get it. This is episode 117 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Kathy Fettke. Kathy, you may know as a guest expert on such media outlets as CNN, CNBC, Fox News, NPR, CBS MarketWatch, and the Wall Street Journal. She's the founder of Real Wealth. She also has 2 very long-running Real Wealth podcasts, The RealWealth Show and Real Estate News for Investors. She's been a real estate investor for a very long time, and she's also one of the 4 co-hosts of On the Market on Bigger Pockets. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. You've been in the game a long time like me, but when was the first time that you remember real estate being something that you thought could help grow your wealth?
Well, I mean, wow, goes way back.
Yeah.
Goes way back when.
For me too.
Not for me personally, but observing as a child, my parents bought a house in Atherton, California when I was 7. And they paid $99,000 for it, which was a lot of money back then. It was a high-end neighborhood. It was the most expensive neighborhood in America at $99,000.
Yeah, $99,000.
Yeah. And then when I graduated from high school, they sold it for $1 million. So in that 10 years, 10X. And my dad was like walking around like he was, the smartest guy in the world. 3 years later, I'm sure you know what happened to the San Francisco Bay Area, but they discovered this little thing called a computer. Yeah. And so 3 years later, that property was worth about $4 million. So
crazy. He
went from feeling like a winner to a loser in a few years. Like, why did I sell that property? And of course, we're thinking, why did you? That was my inheritance.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the first time that I just was like, wow, that's crazy. He's a dentist. He spent years learning his trade and, is very highly paid. And yet he made more just living in a house, So that got my interest. I knew it was something to invest in. The question was, and the problem was, I didn't know how. And I thought I had to be rich before I could do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point because I think that's what a lot of people still think now. Of course, there's way more information out here for people now, podcasts like this, but there is that they have to get the money from somewhere. When you thought about that, where was the first place you looked to try to figure that out? Because this is a while back. It wasn't as easy as it is for everybody now to just pop on Bigger Pockets and listen to 30 episodes. So what did you do to figure out where you were going to get the money from?
It's a very good point. There were not podcasts and the radio shows and the events, the RIAs, basically the real estate investment groups were really selling programs.
Yeah.
If you remember back then, you would go to a local RIA. They would have their whole business model was based on selling product.
And tapes.
Yeah. And they got 50% of the sales. And those sales were like $10,000 to $20,000 to sign up for a program. So, these local RIAs did pretty well, but I'm not sure that they were really helping people, maybe some people, maybe 1% of the people actually build wealth. So, I really it wasn't in my consciousness. That's all I can say. I didn't think I could do it. And I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I just thought, well, maybe someday I'll inherit something, but it was just out of reach. I remember a friend bought a house And she went through the process with me of the offer and the escrow and the down payment, all of it. I was like, too much. I don't think I can do that.
Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting because you did live in an area where something went from 99 to 1 million to 4 million. So I can understand that might make it seem impossible. And there are people still live. I mean, of course, San Francisco is not the exact same right now in terms of markets, but there's markets that are harder to achieve. And that's why some people now look to out-of-state investing. When you finally decided that you wanted to invest in something, what was the first asset that you looked to? Was it a house for yourself or was it investment property?
Well, I am an opportunist. I just can't help it when I'm that entrepreneurial type person that wants to make money from every idea. Like you go to a concert and people are thirsty and it's like, ooh, I should start a water business, that type of person.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of businesses. I always was in business. I have the personality that can't really work for someone else. I'm unemployable. So I already had
I know the feeling.
So I remember one day I walked into a job and I was like 5 minutes late, and the office manager looked at her watch and looked at me and gave me a dirty look. I was like literally 5 minutes late, and I was like, "You don't own me," I'm thinking. I didn't say it, and then I sat down at my desk. I'm like, "Oh no, actually, she does. She owns me from 9 to 5."
Right.
So I'm like, I don't want that, but it's not. It works for some people. It didn't for me. But what happened is my father was a dentist. They typically, hate to say it, but doctors and dentists are typically not great investors. At least back then. I think today there's a lot more resources for them.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
Back then, you just made a lot of money and you were a target and everybody's trying to get your money. And I watched my dad sort of make these investments over and over again that were not great. Things like a Christian coffee shop in Las Vegas. I'm like, Dad, no one's going to Las Vegas for Christian coffee.
Yeah, that seems like a little bit off brand.
I'm like, I'm not sure how you think you're going to convert a bunch of drunks, but anyway, those types of things as a 10-year-old, I'm like, Dad, I think you're off mark here. But so dentists were notoriously just not great at investing, which is so sad. They work so hard, make so much money, and then would often lose it, which was the case.
I feel like back then, maybe that was part of it. They were working so many hours and there weren't all these resources. So where you're driving in the car, you couldn't listen to a podcast for an hour and trying to figure out. And so people do come to doctors and dentists at the time with those. My dad was an attorney, but he worked for the IRS before that. So he was way, way ahead of his time in figuring it out. So he kind of knew, and he was just buying stuff from the courthouse steps. But I think, like you said, where was the time, though, for your dad to invest? He's not going to buy the tapes program and sit at night and listen to audio tapes. That's a hard ask. So you're looking for these, alternative options. But sure, they come with the land in the Everglades type of stuff out there as well.
Oh, I mean, so many. It's like so many. He would go to church and people at church would pitch him. I'm like, Dad, come on, don't do business with people at church. Anyway, so I would watch it and it made me sad as a child. I think it's a lot of my motivation today is to kind of make him proud in the heavens.
Yeah.
But he was just about to retire. I had just gotten married. This was in 1996. So I was about to get married. And he had been like planning his retirement, was about to buy the RV. That
was classic back then, though, to get the RV, travel the country, hopefully bring the kids. The kids are like, I don't want to go.
I'm going to tell you right now, my mom and him would have fought the whole time. It would have been horrible. Don't back up into that. Anyway, I'm glad they never did. But, he was on vacation. He was skiing probably in Colorado. And he gets home and gives me a call and says, I'm in a panic. Why, Dad? I had he said, I invested in this apartment syndication in the 70s or something.
Wow.
And I don't know, like back then when they were doing that and
unregulated back then.
Oh, yeah.
Completely.
So these guys bought in San Rafael, California. They didn't manage it well. Anyway, they sold it. And this was before kind of internet. I don't think he even had an email. And they sent him a snail mail letter basically saying, we sold it. And he had owned been in a passive investor in this property for years, and they just sold it. And by the time he got the letter, he had 2 weeks to identify a replacement property, or he would pay hundreds of thousands of back taxes. This would be the equivalent of like $500,000 today. So he was not. if he had to pay those back taxes because they recapture, a lot of people don't realize you can get all these tax benefits in syndication, but when the syndication sells, it gets recaptured. The government wants that money unless you 1031. So he had 2 weeks to buy a replacement property. And so I'm listening to him knowing nothing about real estate, but I'm like, okay, so what you're saying is you need to find another property in 2 weeks? Like, I can help you with that, Dad. Like, how hard is that? And he goes, well, I don't want to be a landlord. Well, I'm a renter, Dad. What if I found a place that I live on and I'm your tenant and I'll take care of it for you? How's that? And he's like, great. So I went out and it had to be.
See, all this time, Brandon Turner was saying that everyone thought of house hacking. This is you way back in the day. This is the beginning of house hacking, I think. We didn't even know that word back then because Brandon created it, but I was an OG house hacker. Yeah.
And I just said, okay. And, since this is the Zen and the art of real estate investing, I'm going to give you the full story, which is my husband and I met in a personal development course. We fell in love instantly, got married a year later, but we're broke, just completely broke. He had his personal training fitness studio. He was living in it. And I had 2 roommates. We were pretty broke, but in this seminar, it just was like a chiropractic adjustment to my mind and the way of thinking, which was to think is to create. If you can think it, you can create it. And you've got to focus on that creation and not how you can't do it, but how you can do it.
Yeah.
So and in that, there was a visualization process that you've got to retrain your subconscious to accept the things that you want, because oftentimes we'll be like, oh, all the excuses in the world. I can't have that. I don't have the money. Anyway, this is called like future self, where you meet your future self and you'd go into this deep meditative state that my husband ended up as a coach. That's what he does with people today. He's very good at it. So in my future self meditation, she was living in this 2-story, brand new, white, beautiful home with an organic garden, and Rich was up in the 2nd floor. And it was just like this beautiful dream. And so I wrote it down. I could see it so clearly in this meditation. So when my dad said, I need to find a property, I was like, okay. So I got in my car and I drove. I saw a for sale sign in the neighborhood I wanted my kids to go to school in.
Yeah.
Pull up, and there's the 2-story house.
That's
it was
awesome.
Exactly how I saw it.
Yeah.
Organic garden, all the things. It was exactly the amount he needed for the 1031 exchange. I go and I talk to the agent. Yeah. I'm like, okay, it's probably like, I look around and it turns out there's they called it a granny flat. So like a unit just for grandma.
Yeah.
Own kitchen, own bathroom, own entrance. It had another unit that he made for his office that had its own bathroom, which I knew I could put a small kitchen in its own entrance. And I looked at it, I'm like, I could make this into a triplex easy, not knowing even how that works. Yeah. I call my dad. I'm like, I think I found it. Like literally the next day after he'd called me, he drives out. He's like, if you can pull this off, I'm like, I can rent these to my friends tomorrow, and by renting them, I would basically be paying almost nothing to live in this gorgeous home in the neighborhood I wanted to be in. So within 30 days, the first month of our marriage, we were moving out of a rental into this, another rental, but one that we were like, Dad, we're going to take care of all of this. You don't have to worry about a thing. We're going to make all of the payments. We're going to do all the maintenance. And all we request is that someday we inherit it and that be put in the trust, and that the siblings understand that we solved your problem and you're not going to have to pay taxes, but we don't want to share it, with the siblings. This is our inheritance.
We did it.
Yeah, we did it. And he agreed. We put it in writing. That's a key. Put it in writing. Any agreements?
Yeah, even with family, some people will say like, oh, we'll be fine. But like a lot of people, things happen later in life, and then the decisions that were supposed to happen don't happen anymore. So that was really smart. You were ahead of the curve on that as well.
Well, we were a little behind it because we didn't seal the deal, and within 6 months that house went up $100,000. And my dad was like, "What agreement? No, we have one." And so we got it legalized and put in the trust and explained it to the siblings, and they all had the same chance. It was like, if you find a better property, you get the deal. But we did. And then we refied, paid him all the money he had ever put into that syndication to really make it fair to the trust. And that, so when he passed, we inherited the house. And that house had gone up about $1 million in value by the time we inherited it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, but how did you even know at the time to think like, hey, I'll turn this into a triplex? Like, where did that even the little bit of a drop of thought, where did that even come from?
Well, I was renting in Oakland. I had been running a talent agency at the time in San Francisco, and I needed a really beautiful place to showcase to look like I was a successful agent, right? Talent agent, because these models would come, to my house. So I rented a beautiful home in Oakland, in the Oakland Hills, and then rented out the rooms in the back. So I was kind of already doing it. It's just that a different landlord was benefiting.
Yeah.
But, I got to kind of live there for cheap and have a beautiful image, I guess you could say.
It's funny though, because again, like I was saying before, there's so much that's available now that wasn't available to us back then. But I grew up living in ADUs, and my dad would get a house with like a granny flat, like you said, and there'd be some random person in there that I always knew. And I didn't understand at the time, 5, 6, 7, 10 years old, what's going on. And then as I got older, I was like, wait, all our houses have these extra units, and there's somebody in here, and he's always trying to get money from somebody else living somewhere else. It was, and now it's been more popularized, but it's not like our parents weren't doing that or we weren't doing that back in the day. I think it's just interesting that it's now so widespread as if it just occurred, but it didn't. You're talking about house hacking again before there was a term for it, and a lot of my guests have said the same.
Oh yeah, I mean, Rich's grandmother did it. She has in the 20s. She was supporting herself that way. Many immigrants have been able to buy homes that way, or even rent. If you can lease it and rent the rooms out. So it's just it's scrappy. It's what you're going to do. But for us, because I turned it into a triplex where there was there was separation of units. Nobody could come into my kitchen, which was like a ground rule. Like, I'm not sharing a fridge with anybody. Yeah. I did that in college and that's it. So because we were able to turn it into a triplex, we ended up having a friend of ours who was a single dad with a son the same age as our kids. And he was a musician who played at night, and we would just watch his kid. His kid would go to bed, and we were there to watch over him. And so our friend Dave didn't have to pay, for childcare at night. Yeah. So there's ways to make that house hacking really like communal living very, very cool. It was great. We loved it.
Yeah. And I do feel like the idea of more communal living is definitely coming back now more. Affordable housing is hard to find. You guys talk about it all the time on the market. But I feel like a modified communal housing is going to be more important. You're seeing it out of the country in a lot of places where they're building large scale structures to keep everyone together. But I think, there's opportunity with what's happening with commercial real estate to turn it into something that can be more like that. Are you seeing that anywhere across the board, or expect that to happen as well?
I've had dreams of that, of creating housing. I just think it was so great for us. Our kids, we had 2 daughters, they didn't have a brother. So this little boy, he would play with his dinosaurs and they'd play with their Barbies, and it was just adorable. They were the best of friends. I think we're tribal people. I think that's really missing actually in our society. It would help solve the affordable housing crisis and also the loneliness crisis and the daycare crisis and all the things. Why wouldn't you have a house with a bunch of single moms? Why wouldn't you do that? you know?
It sounds great. And I've seen just a much more, at least for my client base on market, multi-generational living is back. And it was something that always made sense. I've seen it. I was on the Apple show Home. They talked about it, 3 families each level for each generation, which was amazing. And then on Live to 100 on Netflix, just they're talking about the blue zones, but they were saying how important this community is. There was a part on Singapore where they had built everything that was built was around the community. So no one had to drive. Everyone had to be together. The daycare and everything was right there, just like you're saying. I do think we're trending back to that. And it'll be interesting to see if they can redeploy some of those assets and hopefully redevelop them, although it's not going to be an easy process. You're going to need some grants to get it done.
Yeah, you just reminded me of, I live in an expensive coastal town in Southern California. And the original landowners of Malibu, their great grandkids still have this plot of land near the ocean, and they kind of turned it into that communal living, and it's beautiful. They're like little tiny homes on this big large plot, but they dine together, they cook together, they grow food together. And they're not just hippies; these are professionals, but they love it. They take care of each other's dogs. The dogs are always running around, and that's the way we're supposed to be. We actually have a syndication we did in Costa Rica with this concept. It's called Rise Costa Rica, about 800 acres for Silicon Valley billionaires or whatever, wealthy people who just want their kids to be raised on earth, on the grounds, and in waterfalls and rivers, and growing their own food. But these, Silicon Valley people could still fly back and forth to San Jose to do it. So anyway, we are doing that concept. It's just that Costa Rica is so far, not everybody wants to leave, their country and, to do that.
Well, so after the first property that you turned into a triplex, how did you guys start to figure out where you were going to go in terms of real estate investing, which eventually led to all of the things that you've done, Real Wealth, and all through these podcasts? But what was the next step after that? Because that's where a lot of people get stuck. They do the first one, they like it, but they don't know how to move forward with more.
Yeah, we didn't either. It was not until, it was about 2003 that I started my radio show. I was in broadcasting.
Right.
Yeah, I was in broadcasting in San Francisco. That was my passion. And I was working in newsrooms. When I married Rich and had children, I didn't want to be chasing fires and working till 2 a.m. Interviewing murderers and all the things that I was like, this isn't the energy I want for my pregnant belly. Anyway, I quit that business and I was able to keep a radio show. And I just thought I'm going to do positive news and see how that goes. It didn't go that great. People don't love positive news.
I mean, look at the news. It hasn't changed much. I was thinking about that the other day. What if news was just all positive? We would just feel so great.
People just don't watch it. I don't know. I don't know. It's like people are driven by fear. But who knows? Maybe someone will succeed at it. But I was kind of doing a coaching show. I did some really cool things like a contest. Who could start their own business, live their dream, will follow you. If there's enough votes for your business, you get a financial reward. And so there were fun things I did, but it was still not taking off, which was fine. I was just doing it because I enjoyed it and I wanted to stay connected to the professional world while raising kids. Then it was 2003 that Rich had just come out with his new book, Extreme Success. He was traveling the country on his book tour. It was with Simon & Schuster. They were billing him as the new Tony Robbins, and things were great, just kind of living the dream. When on that tour, he noticed a freckle, had it checked. Turns out it was melanoma. The doctor back then, again, this was 20 years ago, said, this is a death sentence. You probably have 6 months to live. Cancer's come a long way. Cancer treatment has come a long way since then. But it was like, what? Here we were, like the happy movie.
Cruising,
and it's just like, what? That wasn't in our plan. And so it was like, okay, we're not going to believe this. Remember, power of the thought. But what do we do? And so I took the kids' playroom one day when he was like off on a nature hike, just trying to absorb all of this new information. He came back to 4 people living in the playroom. A friend of mine said, hey, there's this program. These students need a bed. All you have to do is give them a bed. You could put them all in the same room. Just you have to feed them breakfast and dinner. And they pay $600 a month. So I'm like, I've got a playroom. $2,400.
Were you planning because of the expectation of medical bills at the time?
Medical bills, we weren't covered. If you can believe that, our insurance did not cover that. I was like, what? Yeah. It was like, what if he needs to take time off for this treatment? He was the sole breadwinner. His money, he was a personal coach, which means if he wasn't working, he wasn't earning. Yeah. I mean, I was a stay-at-home mom. So I'm just like, I need to get you off the treadmill, go take care of yourself, but we're going to rent out this room and we're going to make 24 hours.
And he was also irreplaceable because he was the asset. So it's not like there wasn't just someone you say, hey, just pull from like the next level up and it would be fine. It didn't work like that.
It's completely dependent on him financially. Not to mention that he did not qualify for life insurance because he was too friggin' honest. So when sitting down with the insurance agent, they'd be like, okay, what are the risks? Oh, I climb 5,000-foot walls. Oh, okay. Do you smoke marijuana? Yes. Do you do them at the same time? Yes. Well, okay. Denied.
Right. It's like, I thought you said to be truthful.
I'm like, honey, He goes, they'd find out anyway. I have to be, he can't lie. So, we didn't have life insurance. I just didn't know what we were going to do. So yeah, that is what had me rent out those rooms, but also change the focus of my show to like, how do you make money? How do you make money, for one, and a lot of it, and passively, so I could be available to my young kids and my husband during this time. It was just like, how? There were not books on it. But I knew there were people out there who understood this passive income thing. And Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was fairly new at that time. So, it's just like, I'm going to shift the focus. And I'm going to get sponsors for this show. I hadn't done that. So those two thoughts, I ended up getting a sponsor who was a mortgage broker. And I charged him a lot of money because I said, I'm going to guarantee you're going to get the results you want. I came home. I'm like, Rich, I just made this guarantee and I have no idea how to give the guy the results. And he goes, Rich said, well, give him like human interest. People don't care about numbers and they're not going to listen, but interview his clients. If he has successful clients, interview them. I was like, oh, brilliant. So I just went back to the sponsor. I'm like, okay, give me a list of your most successful clients. I'm going to interview them. That was the start. It was like they were flipping homes. They were living in homes for 2 years, selling them and taking that gain, that $500,000 gain tax free.
Yeah.
They were, doing rental properties, BRRRRs. That wasn't what it was called then.
Right,
but
without the name. They
without the name.
Bought a property, did some rehab, rented it, refinanced. Yeah, they didn't come up with the term.
No. So it's just like, what? And then from there, I learned more about lending and OPM, how to borrow money to live the dream. Learned about asset protection, how to improve your credit, all these things. I just became obsessed.
Yeah.
And as I became obsessed, so did my audience, and it just grew. And that's when the show took off.
Yeah. And that was really also the beginning time for Real Wealth also, correct?
Yeah. So then what happened is the radio show really took off. Suddenly I was being asked to speak at different real estate investment groups, which I already told you they were pretty awful back then.
Yeah. And show the tapes after you're done, right? They want to really get that sale
up. Oh my gosh. I would just sit there in the audience watching these people run to the back of the room and pay all this money. And it was like, wow, okay, well, I hope it's a good product. And then and then I was coming to speak. So it's like, ooh, I'm kind of associated with this in a way. And And then, and emceeing and all this stuff. And then one time I was sitting in the audience next to this legitimate investor. Like, he's like, oh yeah, I buy foreclosure. I've been doing this a long time and I have apartments. And he goes, this guy up on stage is lying. He's like, you can't even do that in California. And I'm like, well, I raised my hand. I'm like, I understand you can't do this in California. My guest and I were escorted out of the room.
Yeah. Sounds
and that's when I was like, okay, I am going to destroy these real estate investment groups. I'm going to have one that is so good that nobody's want to go to these other ones,
Yeah.
I'm going to give the real information. I just came home. I'm like, Rich, we're going to destroy these groups.
Yeah.
That's all I knew. Like, this is bad. This is bad what they're doing. They're selling garbage for a lot of money to people who don't have a lot of money. Was wrong. And so he's like, yeah, we need to, give the real information and like really how to build wealth. And I'm like, yeah. And he writes real wealth. Yeah, that's it. That's how it started.
That's awesome. Hey, it's Jonathan. This is a brief interlude from the episode so I can talk to you about the fact that my real estate team, the on-market version, we just changed brokerages. So now we're at Real, which is Real Broker, LLC, and it is a progressive brokerage. We're super excited to be there. And one thing about what we do is we are an on-market, investor-friendly real estate team. So you're probably here because you're interested in real estate investing or you're an experienced real estate investor. We work with hundreds of real estate investors because we are focused on understanding investor dynamics. 99% of real estate agents don't understand what investors are looking for. We do. It's my background, and I bring it to my team every single day. So if you are looking for investor assistance in the state of New Jersey, we have you covered. Parts of New York, good. A little bit of a part of Nevada, all good. Also, if you don't know an investor-friendly agent in your area and you need help, just reach out to us. We will connect you. We have investor-friendly friends who are agents all over the country. Let's get back to the show. I want to get your take on this because now we see it in a different format. We have social media, everybody can be out there. So there's large scale syndications and things. There's lots of BS out there in the world about investing. How would you help people now, or how do you help people who come to you and say, like, how do I know what's real and what's not? Because you created Real Wealth to knock that out, but we know it's not gone. It still exists. And all of us who are kind of doing it the right way, we have to fight against that a lot. We do our thing our way, but we know we don't want people to go down the rabbit holes that are out there that are clearly fake.
That's so interesting because I really hadn't thought about that till now. I thought, I feel very instrumental in destroying some of those real estate clubs because
kind for sure. Yeah. I think there's just a new kind.
Yeah, the new kind. I really hadn't occurred to me. There are so many. I mean, I am just constantly trying to educate so that those groups can't exist. But the bottom line is they will, and they do, and people will be susceptible to it. The more you educate yourself, the better, the less vulnerable you are. It's kind of like when I went to Costa Rica for that first time, we were buying that land there, and I totally forgot to look at the exchange rate. and all I knew is I had some of the money and I didn't know what it was worth, and I went to buy some food, and I look at my family, I'm like, we're probably going to get ripped off because I have no idea what any of this means. Gave them the money, got some coins back, walked out. I hear them laughing. I'm like, we definitely just got ripped off, but I don't even know how to defend myself. Or, so it was like that. The joke's on me, right? The joke's on me. I wasn't prepared. So I guess that's the best answer I can give is there are a lot of good books out there. The biggest, most recent example is all these syndications, right?
Yeah. I mean, the way that I look at it, it's like there can be people even now with good intentions, and then they get caught in this floating rate debt cycle that, they maybe made bad decisions and weren't fully vetted, but like you can see that no one really expected the calls to get as high as they were. But then there's this other subset that's clearly can make things look good, which is enticing to people because it's so easy to make things look good now or look like a track record. And I do think I always rely on Brian Burke. Obviously, you know him well.
Oh my gosh,
from Hands Off Investor. To me, it's like I'm always just vetting the operator. The deal, I'll look through the materials, but if I'm 100% on the operator, then I have much more leveraged trust into the deal. Do you think that's a wise way for people to go, even on a smaller scale? They're listening to podcasts, seeing what people are doing, trying to figure out who they can trust along the way.
Yes and no. I used to believe that, and I have done syndications with people with a track record, and they've gone bad.
Yeah.
I've seen people brand new to the business that I wouldn't invest with because they were brand new, and they killed it. They made it happen. So I used to really think that was the answer, and I'm not sure anymore. But it's better, right? It's your chances of success are better investing with somebody who's done the thing over and over for a long time, and more than 5 years, more than even 10 years. Somebody who's been through cycles and understands that markets can change on a dime. And that's the fact. So, what protected me, and believe me, I've done syndications that haven't gone well. Like I said, I even partnered with 40-year veteran, experts and still ran into challenges. I mean, there was COVID. This is unprecedented. How do you write that into your pro forma?
Right. Yeah.
And for me, I was in development. So apartments took off, but development got really challenged because we couldn't get the materials and the costs went up. So, there's always life throws curveballs that are challenging even to the best in the business. So what had happened is my current partner that I've had for 14 years in development, who we've done each development's done very well in spite of challenges. There's been plenty of challenges, but we bought right. There was enough equity. I went to him and said, can you give me a framework of how to buy multifamily because I want to do it right? And he said, oh yeah, I wouldn't leverage over 65% and this and this. And I'm like, well, there's nothing that will work. Right. Are you kidding? If you went with those standards in 2020, 2021, you wouldn't buy a thing.
Yeah.
And, because there was just so much competition. So I just was on the sideline, I had this conservative underwriter. Everything was rejected. I was feeling like a loser. Like, what am I not seeing? And why am I so conservative? But it's like, I'm too old to not be. When you're younger, you can maybe take more risks, but not at this stage in life. You don't want to start over now. Rich and I are turning 60 this year. So it was just like, I just sat on the sideline watching all these people doing these heavy hitters and, buying a multifamily and selling it for twice the price the next year. I'm like, why didn't I do that deal? But then, of course, we saw the market changed on a dime. And my partner was correct because he'd been through, they'd been doing this for 40 years. He knows how things can change on a dime, and he just sticks to the underwriting. He doesn't stray. And I would say Brian Burke does that too. He got out of the game during all of that too.
Yeah. I was asking him, he's like, I got nothing now. He just has the debt fund. And I think that's smart. And I think the way that I look at it, I've always called myself an asset hunter because I'm not looking at the cycles of the market. I'm just always looking. But it just so happened the last couple of years, the assets weren't priced at a level that I was comfortable buying. So I also don't have FOMO, so I don't have to buy. I'd like to, but it's like the numbers still have to make sense. I think I'm a little bit open to modifying my buy box as I see stuff. But I think if I was doing large scale, it just might be easier and smarter to say 40 years in, maybe you just stick to the buy box. And if nothing fits it, nothing fits it. There's a reason for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with a lot of booming asset classes, it's a timing thing. So for those who bought and sold before 2021, you made a killing.
Yeah,
you made a killing. And those who came in right then, it's like every single cycle, those who come in at the end are the ones in the Ponzi. They're the ones who get hurt. And every single day we're seeing another multifamily operator going down. It's very sad because,
it is.
It could have been prevented if rates didn't go up. But when you're in it, you can't really see it, even though it's so obvious.
Yeah.
In 2005, it was so obvious that the loans were bad, but so many people couldn't see it. Thankfully, I could because I had Robert Kiyosaki on the show to kind of point it out to me. And I was able to interview really experienced investors and help a lot of people avoid that recession, that crash and benefit from it. But in this last one, it's like I have enough experience to know that rates are never going to stay at 2 or 3%. And yet we still fooled ourselves into thinking that, right?
Yeah.
I didn't refi a bunch of things thinking I got time.
Yes, right. It's funny though. That's important to note because you can be in it a long time, but you're kind of riding the cycle. The cycle's good. And then you always think like, well, I'll get to it. I'll refi when I need to. And then next thing you know, it's 4, then it's 5, then it's 6, then it was up to 8. And now we're all like, what are we going to do? Now 6 sounds great.
Yeah. Like I'm not going to refi at 4%. I know it's going to go back down to 3. I had that conversation with Rich.
Yeah.
And other times he's like, should we get the 30-year or the 10-year? The 30 years like 3.7 instead of 3.5 or 5. And I'd be like, oh, get the 10-year. And he's like, nah, we're going to get the 30-year.
Yeah.
Like, really? You want to pay more for that? Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it has been a really interesting time. And I think for newer investors who haven't gone through a cycle or just homeowners in general, it is hard to figure out. We can't really blame them. In the national news, like we were saying before, just the news in general is always on doom and gloom. How has it been for you to work with all of your people at RealWealth, where you're going through a time where for 3 years, everything was about an economic collapse and recession and real estate was bad while prices were still going up. Rates were going up and prices were still going up. So it didn't work the way that everybody said it was going to work. How did you help them kind of come to the realization this is okay?
I've been, I went through 2008. I think that's the biggest example that I would present is that the lessons I learned at the beginning of my career through Kiyosaki and other experts that I got to interview on the RealWealth Show, I learned some fundamentals that I stick with today that I wish I'd stuck with completely and always, but I didn't. I veered. And they say, like, don't veer from your path unless you treat that new thing like a brand new business and start from the beginning, like nothing. And the times that I veered off of my path were challenging and shouldn't have done it. But what I know works for me is to invest in areas with job growth, population growth, and infrastructure growth.
Yeah.
So you know that there is a lot being invested in that area, that people are coming to that area, and yet there's the fourth one, it's still affordable to the average person. So you could look at San Francisco or San Jose or San Diego and say, oh, well, there's been growth, not recently, and job growth and population growth, but it's not affordable.
Yeah.
So I learned this from Kiyosaki. He explained to me in 2004 that he was selling all of his California assets because they didn't make sense anymore. And it was becoming
2004. That's
yeah,
pretty,
he could
that's
see
awesome.
he missed a couple of years of growth, but he was willing to take that risk because in 2004, properties had already doubled in value.
Yeah.
And that was a sign to him. He's like, this is not sustainable. And he also knew that the loans were going to reset. And by 2007, people wouldn't be able to make those payments. The belief was, oh, properties will keep going up in value, so we'll always be able to refi, and we use that money to make the payments. It was nutty.
Yeah.
So really, when he explained it, I was like, yeah, this makes total sense. But he goes, but all the fundamentals are in Dallas, Texas. They're not doing those loans. They're being very conservative with their lending because they went through the S&L crisis. They don't want to do that again. So you can't do all those crazy things in Texas. And yet there's all this job growth. There's population growth. The city is encouraging businesses to come, giving tax credits. And yet housing was still 27% undervalued compared to wage growth. So it was like, okay, Rich and I jumped on a plane, went out and like really got to know the area.
Oh,
and
I saw you recently when you took over BP's Instagram recently. I just saw that you had a post of you and Rich in front of the first property when you went to Texas.
Beautiful, beautiful property. It was $145,000. Didn't get any kind of screaming deal on it. Maybe $5,000 off. People came back and judged me for that. Like, what? You didn't get a 30% discount? No, I don't know. It looked like a pretty house and it cash flows. It's in a good area. There's a new freeway coming. There's A-class schools. I don't know. It made sense to me. Those properties stayed rented, same tenants. So shortly after, you could say I bought at the peak because we kept buying 2005, 2006, pretty much the peak.
Yeah.
And yet, when the housing crash happened, those properties kept their value. They didn't go up. They just held. I showed that chart yesterday at the BP Summit. And then over time, of course, they've tripled in value.
But you had to get through the 2008 where a lot of people in Texas who were way too highly leveraged on mostly on larger apartments got crushed. But you had it. Well, that's sticking to your guns. Like you said, you're sticking to it. And I myself, when you were saying that, it was resonating with me because in 2008, I got scared. And I put all my money in cash and I just let it sit there and do nothing because I was just in a panic. I didn't want to lose more money. And I was going against what my dad had taught me. I was selling, got rid of real estate and was just holding residence. We still had investment properties, but I wasn't actively buying. And I'd even put stuff in index funds because I got scared of that. But if I just would have stayed my course, I would have made millions of dollars through the next 5 years when I just got scared.
It's, like woulda, shoulda, we all learn. And that's why we're here today to teach.
Part of the journey.
Because you don't know the future. Of course, it's easy to look back and say, well, I wish I had done this. But back then you didn't know. We thought that the U.S. was no longer going to be the U.S. I was storing food.
Yeah. And, like you said, I have two kids. My kids were little at the time in 2008, and I'm trying to protect what their future is. So I didn't want to mess it up. Yeah. I didn't want to make a big bet on something and then end up having to, like you said, start over, just like neither of us wants to start over now at this point of our life. So you have a different level of conservatism that maybe isn't what other people would consider conservative, because with our backgrounds, we operate on, educated risk.
Yeah.
We know a lot, so we're able to go into something that maybe somebody else doesn't know about. But still, I'm not going to, I'm not betting on red or black here with my, my kid's future. It's just not going to happen.
You're not going to do it. So to answer your question, there was no risk for me. It's like I already knew. I know enough. So if you don't know enough, then you're probably better off just sitting, not doing anything until you do know, or that you're partnering with someone who does. But, I already knew demographic growth, demand for housing, lack of housing. I had already been through the worst housing crisis in our history, and our properties did fine. Not all of them. I know which ones didn't do fine. The California ones that we kept for some stupid reason, and I bought 3 in Boise that there was only 2 employers at the time. Then there was 1 after the recession. So we, Boise's obviously great today, but back then it was it was a bit of a bubble with not enough of a job diversification there. So I knew what to look for, and I didn't panic at all. Now in 2020, I did, when we're all sitting at home, stay-at-home orders, and I'm like, holy moly, I have helped thousands of people build their portfolios all over the U.S. We have handheld them through this process. Did I screw up? Did I do them wrong? And it's a terribly scary feeling to not just think you've messed up your own investment, but other people's that rely on you, And so I was terrified. So I thought, okay, the only thing I know how to do is get it more information. Let's just get more information. More information helps you make decisions and resolves the fear, because you have no fear when you know what to do. And so I thought, okay, every single day I got our team together and I said, every single day we're doing a webinar. People are sitting at home in panic.
Yeah.
Every day we're doing a webinar, and every day it will be with a property manager in one of the areas that we work with. So because we work with 15 teams across the country, that was like 2 weeks of content, and then we'd trade off. So, and the market was moving that quickly that it's like we'd focus on Atlanta on Monday and Tampa on Tuesday. And,
I mean, we really didn't have anything else to do at the time. We were all really confused as to when we were going to go back. It was like the time when you knew you weren't going back outside anytime soon. That was when it sunk in for me. I was like, okay. And we started doing online meetups, similar. We're doing 3-4 a week because what else was there
What
to
else
do?
are you going to do?
Yeah.
And you need information when you're in panic mode. I can't emphasize that enough. If you're afraid, you just need more information. That's all. Just educate yourself. So every single day, the property managers would come on and say, I don't know what's happening. The headlines are saying there's going to be all these evictions and people not paying. But what we're seeing is that we have wait lists and people with lots of money, and they're paying and they're bidding up these rentals. And people would text me or message me, you're lying. This isn't true. They're, I'm just interviewing property managers.
Yeah.
That's all I'm doing. Every single one. And it was exactly opposite of the headlines. So as our listeners listen, they're like, that's actually true for my properties. They're still rented. In fact, nobody wants to be stuck on the street or have to move during COVID. They're making their payments.
Yeah.
So, I know that there were places like in LA where people didn't have to pay their rent, but that just wasn't the case for us. We were in markets that are landlord friendlier. People.
Same with me.
And also our property managers learned how to help their tenants. And we brought all these 15 property managers together and said, we need to work together. You're not competitors. We're in the same business. How do we help our tenants during this hard time? So then they created all these lists of where these people could go to get government money if they were forced out of work, and like programs for these people. And they were super grateful and thankful that we were able to help so many people stay in their properties and help the landlords keep them because the rent was coming in. So I don't know. It just created all this positivity, and we ended up having one of the best years ever.
Yeah. But what a really nice trickle down from just where you started Real Wealth and how the information gets out. It goes from you to getting info from the landlords, getting to the people on the call, but then all of that goes all the way down to the renters who end up getting assistance. So I think people, there's this weird thing out there that people think all landlords are like slumlords and we don't care about tenants, but large scale, it's not the case at all. But it's nice to see that just getting the information goes all the way down to the tenants. And all of the good landlords like us know your job is to help the tenants. They're caretaking your property. You're trying to work together to make sure that everybody's happy, because then you get less calls.
Yeah.
You only get service calls, which you should get. You own the property. I mean, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously some bad landlords out there, but, hopefully we can help change that by saying what you just said. Your tenants are your client. Treat them well.
Yeah. I wanted to go back on something that we talked about a little at the beginning before we hop off. You and Rich met at a personal growth seminar, and this is about the mindful approach to real estate investing. Do you think that your shared interest in personal development helped you over all of the hurdles of real estate over the year, like these downturns and all these things? What was there a part of the mindset that you guys had, just how you described how you thought and how Rich thought? It really sounds like this is a thing that helped you get through all the things, including just being a parent return and all the things that come with that.
100%. I wouldn't be where I am today without that mindset shift. We have voices in our head that we don't know are there, that come from our parents, that come from society, that come from others. And oftentimes they're negative. So until you can like retrain your brain, I cannot emphasize enough the power of this. Read any successful athlete or business owner or anyone, and it starts there. In the personal development course, there was one exercise. It was like there was a lot of physical activity that helped lock it in. And one of them, they lined up all the students at one side of the room, and they said, okay, your goal is on the other side of the room. Think of your goal. Whatever your goal is, it's on the other side of the room. Everybody in this room has to get over to your goal to the other side of the room, but nobody can do it the same way. Mm. It's like, okay, so one person walked, and then the next person ran, and the next person skipped, and the next person did somersaults, and it was all different. And at the end, we all made it over. And so the moral of the story was intention is 99%. How you do it, there's a million ways. Intention's the most important. It's 99% of it. So, and if you don't have that clear intention, like this is where I'm going, then it doesn't matter how much technique you have
And I've always said, I feel like people they're focusing on like wanting to make money. Sure, they get into investing. They want to provide a nest egg. Those are great things. But if they're not working on themselves too, you're never going to be your best as an investor if your life is a disaster and you don't have like personal accountability. So I'm always trying to coach people to really turn the tables on themselves first. Of course, know your finances. That's a great, foundation of being able to invest. But you have to have your whole life in order, else you're going to make bad decisions. There's no way around it.
Yeah, it's discipline is everything, and it starts one step at a time. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily a disciplined person by nature, but one success in something retrains your brain that, hey, I maybe I can stick to something. And maybe it's so simple as I take 3 walks a week to move my body. And that's 20 minutes a day. And if you stick with it, there's like, a new belief system. I can do it. And next might be I read, I don't know, a book a month or something, or listen to a book a month, and stick to it. So the more that we retrain our brain into believing we can do something, we come to actually believe it. It creates literally new neural pathways in your brain.
Yeah. I mean, you manifested the property that you got, the one that you turned into a triplex. I mean, people can say what they want about whether technically manifestation is real or not, but it happened.
It's
you
happened
wanted
over
this,
and over.
And it showed up.
Over and over and over. I have a dream board on my wall with all the things I want. When I had gone through a divorce and gone through many breakups and was like, okay, after I did this personal growth thing, I wrote down in detail of 2 pages full of everything I wanted. And my spouse met Rich shortly after, like a couple of weeks later. He fit everything.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I can't tell you how many times we now determine who's our new employee. We write it down as clear as can be, and boom, there they are.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Kathy, where's the best place for people to find you? I know you're very well versed on Instagram. I watch everything that you have on there, but where's the best place if someone wanted to, watch your content, get in touch with you guys?
Sure. RealWealth.com is our business, and Kathy Fettke on Instagram. And then of course I have the Real Wealth Show and real estate news for investors. And Bigger Pockets on the market.
Yeah. I mean, how fun is that show? I mean, obviously I know all of those guys, but I've said this before. That's personally my favorite real estate podcast to listen to. I love that there's 4 voices and you guys have just a great dynamic of going back and forth. But I was telling you before we hopped on, that's the most current show that's out there. I feel like we're just following the trends along with you guys. So that I'm telling everyone, like, if you have to pick one, just pick that. You get 4 different points of view on every one. And you get to hear you guys make fun of each other the whole time, which I love.
Oh, I'm so glad. I got a random call one day and they cast me in it and I didn't know what it was for or anything. Yeah. Kaylin and Dave are responsible for the casting, and it was instant chemistry. I didn't know any of them. And
oh, really?
No.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I'm
always telling Dave on the side, I'm like, listen, if anyone's on a break, just call me. I'm ready to go. Like, I'm ready to go. Because I really think I think what we were saying before is you need to take in as much education as you can, but then you need to hear other people talk about it too. And when you have 4 voices all at once, because you guys aren't always agree, have different experience, different backgrounds, you live in different areas, I really think you get a full cycle on that show, as opposed to just, of course, this is you and I, we're going to provide a lot of information, but you're so constant with those shows that I think it's a real benefit and right at the edge of being current at all times.
Thank you so much. I love that. Yeah, we have totally different perspectives. Even yesterday on Bigger Pockets Virtual Summit, Henry and I are both buy and hold investors, but he does it himself, and I don't. I'm like, I try to be as passive and hands-free as possible. So just so many different perspectives and ways to do things. I appreciate it. We have so much fun together.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing you at BPCon next year in Cancun. I think it will be this time.
Yes.
We're releasing the details.
How fun is that?
And I did see you at last year's, but the next thing I know, you guys were going on a roller coaster and I was going home. So. Oh
my gosh, the roller coaster was so fun. You guys don't miss Bigger Pockets conference. It'll sell out. It's the best.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, Kathy, I really appreciate your time. So glad I could get you on here.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Yep, that was Kathy Fettke. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with me, Jonathan Green. And I just want to remind you, and this is always an uncomfortable part, I don't want you to think that I'm begging for you to like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you have to do for the podcast, leave a 5-star review. But if you like the podcast and you think it adds value in the real estate investing sphere, then just do me a personal favor. Like the podcast, follow it, share it when you can with your friends, and be so kind as to write a 5-star review if you believe it deserves a 5-star review up against what else is out there. I would really appreciate it, and I hope you keep listening.